continue this week with the Sutta explorations, and today is happens to be a very important sutta that we'll be covering. One that has taken me quite some time to finally finish after many years of hesitating, because it's such a powerful sutta, and it's one of the key suttas, the discourses that really captivated me and blew me away, as the saying goes, when it comes to the Dhamma. How beautiful the Dhamma is, and how poignantly pragmatic, practical, applicable, undeniable to my inquisitive mind, and really made the impact, powerful impact. I was mentioning to a student recently how in my earlier years, in my early 20s, I used to do a lot of exploration. Okay, let me go into this and that and this and that. And I was exploring many religions at the same time as I was doing exploring Buddhism. But even within Buddhism, there's so many branchings of it which were very intriguing. And I used to go to my first teacher, Bhante Ratanasara, back in Los Angeles. That was my, place to go to. I was there at least 5 days out of the week. I felt like that's where I belonged. And he would listen to me, my discoveries, quote unquote, of, oh, this part of Buddhism, this is it. And I would list things from different later denominations of Buddhism, as in Mahayana and Vajrayana, and he would patiently listen. It was like, yeah, sure. And then he would make a comment or here or there, and then he would say, Candana, he's the one who gave me the name Candana. That's why I wanted to keep it as a bhikkhu later on. He would say, sooner or later, you're going to come back to the original teachings. And his eyes would just go big like this. And I would say, Bhante, what do you mean? And he would say, you're going to come back to Theravada. Go ahead and spend your time, wasting your time here and there. But sooner or later, you're going to come back. And I would say, oh, yeah. And lo and behold, not long after, I did. And this was one of the suttas, the discourses that really captivated me and pulled me in, because it's multi-nuanced. It has so many layers. And the sutta I'm referring to for today is the Alagadūpama Sutta. I first gave a talk on this briefly when I was a layman. I think it was about, when was that? Well, in Los Angeles, about 10 years ago or something. And it's so powerful because you think you know the sutta. You think, because this is there's several similes that the Buddha gives in the sutta. And by the way, the name of the sutta itself in English is, the way I translated it is, the simile of the handling of the venomous water snake. Well, you're going to discover what this venomous water snake is. Because immediately you think, oh, okay, it's a dangerous thing, it's a dangerous thing. The last thing you'd expect it to be would be the Dhamma, the venomous water snake. How could that be? What is the Buddha referring to? How? What's the connection? Well, we're going to see what happens in the sutta. in relation to what we understand the Buddha was to be saying, as is the case here, we'll discover in a minute or so when we look at the antagonist or the character. The first portion of the sutta is dedicated to exposing. And there was a bhikkhu by the name of Ariṭṭha who had developed some ideas, his own, ways of interpreting what the Buddha is really trying to say. Specifically, when it came to stumbling blocks, obstacles that are beyond just obstacles, specifically sensuality, sexuality, in fact. Because the Buddha is very clear as to what the holy life is for a bhikkhu in relation to the rest of humanity, let's say lay people and their own practices of living, including sexuality and sensuality. Those things don't mesh with the life of a bhikkhu, a monk. They don't go hand in hand. In fact, the holy life collapses. That bridge gets burned and destroyed in case the bhikkhu or monk or nun thinks that, oh, we can do those both. It's okay. It's just your attitude. You have to be beyond it. So it's okay for you to engage, like many so-called monks have been doing since, from Ariṭṭha's time, but in our own lifetime, in the West especially, when monks come from, whether from the Orient or even Westerners who take on the robes, this is a big issue for many people. So here we have a gentleman by the name of Ariṭṭha, a monk, who was promulgating, who was misrepresenting, in fact, the teachings of the Buddha, saying that, oh, the Buddha was never against, even though the Buddha says obstacles are a major problem, but in reality, they are not. So the person brings their own narratives and worldviews into the mix. And we're going to see how that itself is misrepresenting the Dhamma and disrespecting the Dhamma. And what happens when you disrespect a venomous snake by trying to grab it by its body, or even worse, by its tail? It turns around and bites you. And we're going to see. It's a powerful image. In a world where everybody, every Joe Schmo, as they say, or Tom, Dick, and Harry, and Louisa, because we have a whole range these days, men and women who are throwing themselves into the world of teaching Dhamma, gathering people around them, calling themselves teachers. They don't realize what they're doing, and this is a warning. The sutta itself is a warning, especially the beginning part of it, because we have the example of Ariṭṭha, as I mentioned, but we have many Ariṭṭhas today. I have personally come across many Ariṭṭhas. And you try to help them by indicating, but the Buddha says this about that. And for many reasons, including decorum and protocol, you see that the person has got their path, their thing, and it's a different objective altogether. And the least of their concerns is making sure that they are properly presenting the words of the Buddha. They don't care. And that is also to the detriment of themselves and the many who trust them blindly for whatever reasons. So those are some of the things that I wanted to say in the beginning. This is a very famous sutta. Unfortunately, many people don't know the whole sutta. They just pick one aspect. The other simile that we have heard of a lot, the image of crossing over with the water raft, where the Buddha again gave the metaphor, the simile of a raft, a boat that a person uses to cross over to the other shore. Now, what do you do with the water raft once you're there, once you're standing on solid ground on the other shore? You made it. And here there's the Buddha's words again, warning us not to go ahead and getting attached to the Dhamma itself. Just like that man, when he crosses over to the other side, made it through the tumultuous waters of the ocean, is alive and well. He's not going to go ahead and hug or carry the water raft over his head for the rest of his life, walk around with that boat, carrying it. No. He'll just push it back, adrift into the water, or maybe bring it up to the, onto the sand, and that's it. Walking away from it. That's what the Dhamma is. Imagine, just try to grasp the non-attachment that the Buddha had towards the Dhamma itself. You don't see this anywhere in any religion, any thought, any philosophical school even. Everybody worships the thing that they teach. They build temples and huge monuments for it. The Buddha is encouraging us, once we have used the Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, the teachings, you're not attached. This is maturity, true maturity, which the world lacks. The world of religions lack. This is not a competition, though. This is about our lives. Are we living our lives, and how are we living it? Following what methodology? That's why the Dhamma is not for everyone. I keep repeating. Only for those of us who are mature enough to really see it for what it is, be grounded in real life as we're approaching the Dhamma and the practice of it and the understanding of it, let alone the presentation of it, not misrepresenting the Buddha. So there's many, many lessons in this sutta. So I just briefly wanted to touch on it by a small introduction, if you will. But anyhow, this is a Majjhima Nikaya. So we're going back to the middle length discourses, which I'd like to do more often, but sometimes they are as long as the Digha Nikaya suttas, long discourses. Even though it's called middle length, sometimes you discover that they're actually quite long. But I don't know if I'll be able, I don't think I'll do it I could be able to do it in one session today. It's not fair for the sutta. So it deserves some room. So to really go deep in it. So this is Majjhima Nikaya Middle Length Discourses, number 22. And it's from the section on similes, Upama Vagga. And as I mentioned, it's the Alagadūpama Sutta, the simile of handling the venomous water snake. Many times actually, it's presented as simile of the water snake or snake, or but it's not the snake itself. That's the problem. It's our handling of it, which from the start we see. So here we have the first section of it, the section that's Ariṭṭha's wrong and convolutedly evil view. I have personally heard this. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at the monastery in Jeta's park that was offered by the householder Anathapindika near the city of Savatthi. It was during that time when a certain bhikkhu named Ariṭṭha, who had previously made his living by capturing vultures, began misrepresenting the Dhamma by promoting his own wrong and convolutedly evil view. To this end, he would state the following. The way I have come to understand the Dhamma as taught by the Blessed One, all those types of actions that the Blessed One has stated to be obstructions in themselves really have no impact on the one who engages in them. Thus, as far as I can see, in no way could such behaviors truly hinder the damaging to the person who performs them. To be damaging, hinder or be damaging to the person who performs them. Do you see that? He's stating, yeah, the Buddha says there are types of actions that are obstructions, but in reality, that's his interpretation. If you want the truth, there are really no obstructions there for the person who engages in them. So it's just a show, it's a superficial thing, it's an unnecessary even principle that the Buddha is teaching here in his, according to his own rendition of it. Because they can never damage the person. And who knows, maybe he was engaging. We don't have enough information on that. In the suttas, it doesn't say that. But a person who believes in such things and is audibly saying it for people to know and hear and declaring it, proclaiming it into the world, usually it means that the person is already engaging in what that entails. Anyhow, before I say more, I'll just continue. On hearing about this, many bhikkhus decided to intervene as they went to the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha and began questioning him. Friend Ariṭṭha, could it be true that you have been promoting such a wrong and convolutedly evil view by declaring, the way I have come to understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, all those types of actions that the Blessed One has stated to be obstructions in themselves really have no impact on the one who engages in them. Thus, as far as I can see, in no way could such behaviors truly hinder or be damaging to the person who performs them. And the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha replied by saying, that statement is true, friends. He's not denying it. For that is exactly the way I have figured it, and therefore have come to understand the Dhamma as taught by the Blessed One. That is, all those types of actions that the Blessed One has stated to be obstructions in themselves really have no impact on the one who engages in them. Thus, as far as I can see, in no way could such behaviors truly hinder or be damaging to the person who performs them. Here I can pause for a second because as I was mentioning earlier, sharing with you how I had studied other branches of Buddhism, and I had teachers in each of those, aside from Theravada, referring to Mahayana and Vajrayana. Vajrayana in the form of Tibetan Buddhism. There were clear instructions in a sense that, or introductions to secret teachings, secret initiations. I didn't know much in those days, but when you look into the suttas and the teachings of the Buddha is very clear, however. There's nothing secret about the teachings. There are no secret initiations. And what those secret initiations, as in the case of Tantrayana or Mantrayana or Vajrayana, refer to, involve sensuality, specifically sexuality. But they don't openly talk about this. They always have left it in like, yeah, but then, you come across some people very apologetic approach that they promote is, no, these are just metaphors. Meanwhile, if you look at the paintings in the tankas, or even the statues or the wall murals in some of the old, whatever survived monasteries, it's clearly demonstrated. Dakinis and other beings and bodhisattvas and others engaging in sexuality, sexual acts. Meanwhile, they claim to also be practicing Vinaya, code of discipline of monks. And sexuality is in fact a parajika, a defeat. You're out. You can never become a bhikkhu again if you engage in such a thing. So you see how convoluted, how polluted, how corrupted it had become. And nowadays, even famous Tibetan monks, heads of sects, they were challenged, and they kind of said, one Theravadan bhikkhu was mentioning how he was in the presence of the Dalai Lama in Thailand, where he was giving a talk apparently to Theravadan monks for some reason. And one of the Theravadan monks raised his hand and asked about this question, about this sexuality or sexual practice. Is it, because they can't deny it, it's there, it's in their sects, in their texts, sacred texts, by the way. And the Dalai Lama says, well, he turns to some of his Tibetan monks, and he says, does any of you practice this? And no one says a word. Even if they were they going to say something? But these things, anyhow, without getting too into the deep end of this, it's quite silly, it's ludicrous, it's corrupt, it's ugly, has no place in the Dhamma. But that's what happens when you leave it up to human beings, idiots, to pollute the Dhamma like this, like Ariṭṭha did. But this is not happening 1,000 or 2,000 years after the Buddha's death. This was happening at the time already in India. This is not a Tibetan person, This is not a Vajrayana. There's no Vajrayana. It wasn't going to be for another 1,000 years, by the way. But already you see the ignorance of the person. And his friends call him out. Then, on witnessing this, those bhikkhus eagerly endeavored to release Ariṭṭha from his wrong and convolutedly evil view in his misrepresentation of the Dhamma. In this way, they tried to challenge him, as they questioned and then cross-questioned him on various aspects of the Dhamma, in an effort to convince him to relinquish his evil interpretations, by telling him, friend Ariṭṭha, do not make such false statements. Do not misrepresent the Blessed One, friend. For it is wrong to be stating what is completely untrue, things that have nothing to do with the Blessed One. This because the Blessed One would never say or teach such things. On the contrary, the Blessed One has repeatedly and in countless different ways declared and called out those hindering actions and behaviors to be just that, obstructive and hindering, given the simple fact that they do obstruct, hinder, and impede, and therefore block the very progress and growth of anyone who engages in them. Friend, the Blessed One has advised us again and again that there is little satisfaction but much suffering, and with plenty of regrets, in pursuing passions and sensual lust, which ultimately bring nothing more than pure dissatisfaction, anguish, and danger to the person who engages in them. Also, friend, in demonstrating the seriousness of this to us, the Blessed One has even used the simile of the skeleton, the simile of a lump of flesh, the simile of the grass torch, the simile of the pit of scorching charcoals, the simile of the dream, the simile of the borrowed goods, the simile of a fruit on a tree, the simile of the butcher's knife and chopping block, the simile of the sharp stake and the simile of the poisonous head of a snake. He has explained and clarified this on many an occasion to highlight for us the dangers and drawbacks that always follow that disappointing chase after sensual gratification. For the very dangers and terrors it brings are far greater, outweighing and outlasting any sensual desire that one pursues. I fail to see anyone who's able to disprove that. Anyone who's lived on this planet who has had a life where they pursue these sensual desires, lustful actions, lustful thoughts, of course, and to become truly gratified. It leaves you empty-handed. There's nothing to write home about. You're never gratified. You're never satisfied. That's why the Buddha had given these 10 similes, which basically the first one is the what was it? He's saying the skeleton. So think of a skeleton that still has some blood on it, but it's fleshless. It's blood smeared, but nothing on it to satiate, for example, a hungry dog or wolf or jackal who's trying to chew on it. There's just bones left. They're just going to sharpen their teeth with, but nothing happens after. I mean, it doesn't. There's no flesh. There's no meat. That's a simile for sensual pleasures. The second one was the piece of meat, right? If you've ever seen, for example, vultures or crows or other birds of prey, especially those that are detritivores that feed on, let's say, carcasses and things, they start attacking each other mercilessly just for that lump of flesh that's there, that's left. And sometimes they lose a beak, a foot, a wing. Sometimes they die, all because they're pursuing that lump of flesh. And that's the second simile. The third one, I think it was the grass torch. Yeah, the grass torch here, the example that we have the Buddha giving in other suttas. By the way, in this sutta is not, it takes it for granted that the reader knows. That's why I'm presenting them. I'm unpacking it for you, so you don't have to. You'll be introduced to the similes themselves in a fuller light. So the grass torch is a metaphor that the Buddha has given for a person who's traveling in the dark, carrying a grass torch, but the problem is that he's going against the wind. What happens when you're holding a grass torch and the wind is blowing towards you? You burn yourself because the flames are going to go straight towards you. That's the simile. And it's a terrible image of what it does. And that's the sensual pleasure quest that the whole world is pursuing. The next one was, which one was it? Burning coals. The Buddha gives this example in many places. We've already seen them in some suttas we've covered together. But think of a charcoal pit. Instead of a water well, it's just a pit that's full of charcoal. It's full of embers, and it's hot. And two guys come much bigger and stronger than you and drag you and toss you into it. That is sexual pursuit, sensual pursuit. And remember, this is the Buddha's talking to bhikkhus. Okay? He's not talking to lay people. Bear that in mind. So there's distinction between laity and monastics. This is a discourse, at least at this point, for a practitioner It's geared towards their completion of the holy life. And you cannot complete the holy life if there is engagement in the latter portions of the stages of awakening. A layperson, however, can, up until a certain point has been reached, of course. By the time that the person attains anagami, they cannot engage, they cannot even think about sexuality. They cannot even think about sexuality. And what can we say about an arahant? So what was the other one? Oh, the next one was the dream simile. The dream is a reference to, the Buddha is making a reference here for a person who is asleep and he's seeing a beautiful dream. And he has to wake up and realize, oops, all that was empty. Everything vanished. That's what happens when you're pursuing sensual pleasures, if you're being honest with yourself. Every single time leaves you disappointed. And then the next one was the borrowed goods. A person who basically prides himself for having things, meanwhile they don't belong to him. The way the world leaders today make deals or break deals based on whatever that is not theirs, but on whatever that is belonging to someone else. And in this case, the someone else here is Mara. The body doesn't belong to you, This is borrowed good. Your eyesight is not yours. You're just using it. It's like on a lease in America. I think it might some other Western countries. There's you don't have to buy a car, for example. You can lease a car. You will pay less amount of money to drive away with it, but at the end of the contract term, you have to return the car back, and they don't owe you anything. But you drove the car, brand new car, so that's called a lease, not a purchase. So you borrowed it, basically. You were paying huge sums of money for it, but it was never yours. It's like borrowing a suit that's not yours, but carrying yourself as if it belongs to you. It's your suit. At the end, you have to return it. That's what you're doing at the end of your life. When your eyes don't work anymore, when your spine doesn't work anymore, when you lose your voice, your hearing, that means you returned. Your contract with Mara had finished with that department. So now you had to return whatever you used. So before we die and return the whole package, let us complete the task for which we have this body. To see all these delusions that we are told, we keep telling ourselves these lies. The next one is the fruit that's hanging on the tree. This is a metaphor that the Buddha used for a person who sees, let's say, a mango or a fruit, but it's too high up on the tree, and he's hungry, and he doesn't care, and he starts chopping the tree down simply to get that fruit without realizing there's somebody living there or staying up there. So he kills the tree, kills the fruits, kills whoever was up there living, calling it home as well. And the butcher's knife, or the chopper's, the chopping block, that is basically the executioner's chopping block. And it involves what I was saying earlier. The holy life goes in one direction, sensual pleasure, seeking of sensual pleasures goes the other direction entirely. And never the twain shall meet. In the Bhikkhu Sutta some years ago, I covered that, where you have a bhikkhuni who was trying to tempt Venerable Ananda, and she lies about her health and sends a guy to go and get Venerable Ananda to come and teach her some Dhamma. Meanwhile, she sneaks under her bed naked. And Venerable Ananda was allowed by the Buddha to go to the females' quarters, including the king's harem, and with the permission of the king, of course, but also to go to the bhikkhunis' nunnery and to give them Dhamma ever so often. So he didn't break any rules. So he goes, but he realizes immediately what was going on. And he gives her a Dhamma talk, but not the way that she hoped. I mean, things don't end up the way she had hoped, but soon she realizes her terrible, terrible, evil plan was a big mistake. And she apologizes because Venerable Ananda says, "Sister, sexuality, sex, is a bridge we do not cross because it kills, it destroys the holy life for the person." So sense desires, the pursuit of sense desires, is the kiss of death, is poison. It kills. So you cannot sustain the holy life while you're engaging with this. That's why they're using these similes. So, and the next one was the sword, or the sword stake. Sense desires, if you really carefully look at them, they're sharp as spears, as as a stake. They used to put people's heads on stakes, in the medieval times and other. It's painful because you can never satisfy any of them. If you taste something delicious, it's not the end of the story there. You want to retaste it. You want to taste it again tomorrow or some other time. You're never satisfied. That's why the king needs more than one woman in his harem. It's called a harem. Because he needs variety. He's never satisfied. So we confuse the two. The dissatisfaction with seeking a variety. No, variety is you trying to make up the fact that you failed the first time around because it never gratified you. It will never satisfy you. This is not just about sex. This is about all sensual pursuits. And the snake's head, basically, it's a reference to the risky, dangerous fact that the snake's head, simply because it's cut, you don't go ahead and chew on it, play with it, even though the snake is dead with the snake's head. In Africa, for example, when they catch a very venomous snake like a black mamba, they don't eat it. They, they use slingshot, or they use their spears, or just rocks. I once seen an episode like that on a documentary where the natives see that there's a tree close in their village and there's a mamba, black mamba on it. They don't waste any time. They quickly go and bring it down, and they cut off the head and they bury it. I was surprised. Well, the Buddha has addressed that apparently, because the snake's head will be a detriment to us in the present and in the future, as well as those from our past. So those I wanted to, because sometimes people ask, what are the references for, or similes? I mean, what are they? Could you tell us more? So that way now you know. So anyhow, we go back, excuse me, to the sutta. However, despite all their efforts at convincing the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha of his wrong and convolutedly evil view, and although they tried pressing him by questions and their cross-questioning, nevertheless, he kept staunchly holding on to his wrong view, so tenaciously, obstinately insisting on his misinterpretation, and misunderstanding of the Dhamma, while claiming it to be correct. Then, on realizing that they were unable to dissuade him from his wrong and convolutedly evil view and misrepresentation of the Dhamma, those bhikkhus went and approached the Blessed One. And once having paid homage to the teacher, they sat to one side and began reporting on what had taken place with the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha, while adding, one moment, please. Therefore, they're reporting to the Buddha himself now and adding this. Therefore, Bhante, the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha, who had previously made his living by capturing vultures, that was his profession. And remember, in India, the religion of the Brahmins had everything to do with sacrificing animals at the time of the Buddha. And for centuries, even to this day, if you go to Nepal or other places, they sacrifice animals. Even though many people, or Westerners especially, have the misconception that in India, everybody's a vegetarian, or they don't touch animals, they let cows roam freely, they don't harm animals, or the whole ahimsa thing, nonviolence. That's not been part of the Brahmanic tradition for thousands of years. The reason why I say this is many of these hunters, or in this case, Ariṭṭha formerly was a person who captured vultures and sold them. So he was in the trade of, but who would need a vulture? Right? Unless for your own amusement, perhaps, or to make sacrifices. Because animals would be sacrificed, goats, sheep, cows, bulls, horses, were sacrificed for the gods of the Brahmins, oddly enough. So many of our own understanding, therefore, is based on crooked legs. They're very shaky. So we have to question them oftentimes, and by going and finding out, is it really true? That's the whole objective of our own series here with the exploration of the suttas. Anyhow, so they're saying he refused to give up his wrong and convolutedly evil view, Bhante, despite our efforts at trying to convince and press him by questioning and then cross-questioning, as he kept staunchly holding on to his wrong view, and ever so tenaciously, obstinately insisting on his misinterpretation and misunderstanding of the Dhamma, claiming it to be correct. Realizing that we were unsuccessful in our efforts, Bhante, to dissuade him from his wrong and evil views, we decided we must report this matter to the Blessed One himself. This is a practice that is so helpful, so crucial to maintain order, to maintain proper protection of any teaching, especially one as beautiful as the Dhamma. We don't have that. In fact, after the death of the Buddha, we haven't had that. We never had that afterwards. So what can we say about today? We have Ariṭṭha here, okay? We're really, seeing, we're criticizing, we're disparaging his example, but I mentioned to you earlier, there are many, many Ariṭṭhas. I've come across many of them I mentioned. But what do you do? Who do you go to report this to? To the Buddha? How? That's why the debacle that we have today, where the Dhamma is dying, the light of the Dhamma is dying. You're becoming aware of the suttas, the way the Buddha really taught it. The noble arahants kept it alive and promoted it and shared it with the world freely, openly. that will be the necessary reporting involved. Because everybody, even in the Sangha, of course, that's what I'm referring to, they will come up with their own versions of the Dhamma. What they mean, well, this is what it means in their mind. But there's such a lack of understanding because people are not studying the teachings. They pick up whatever suttas that they like, or the common person likes, stories, this and that. None of the impactful and powerful suttas, dependent origination suttas, especially those that deal with emptiness or sunyata, that challenges the whole status quo. They don't want to touch it. So they regurgitate what they had heard from others, similarly superficial learners. So that's what you have in the world today. And that's what we're trying to do to change that all this time. And even if one person gets the message, job's done, I'm happy. And we have more than one, as we can see. And especially listeners around the world who are truly appreciating the work we're doing here. But it's just the Dhamma, that's what it is. We are putting these blocks around that light of the Dhamma so the wind does not blow it out. But you are the person who's practicing, the person who's listening, the person who is carefully scrutinizing what is Dhamma from what is not. That is what it will be, essentially. That is what really protects the Dhamma from dying out. We don't have the luxury that these bhikkhus had to go and report the matter to the Buddha straight, the king of the Dhamma, straight away. And let's see what the Buddha does. Then, once this was said, the Blessed One addressed a certain bhikkhu by instructing him, "Go now, bhikkhu, and in my name tell that Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha, who previously had made his living by capturing vultures, that the teacher is calling him." "Yes, Bhante," that bhikkhu replied as he went to the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha and informed him, "The teacher is calling you, friend Ariṭṭha." "Yes, friend," replied the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha as he went and approached the Blessed One. Then, after paying homage to the teacher, he sat down to one side, and the Blessed One began questioning him. I don't recall of any sutta where the Buddha just immediately chastises a person based on what he heard about the person. I don't think I've ever come across, unless he witnessed it. It happened before his eyes, so there's no need for him to question further. But the Buddha would always ask, giving the benefit of the doubt to the person. Proper protocol is being kept. This is the due process that the Buddha or the Sangha uses. So advanced, so avant-garde at that time period. Even to this day, people are ready to shoot you down without asking some questions. Everybody's running on presumptions that are based on assumptions, that are completely based on wrong view in many cases, without sitting down and really listening through and through to what this person or this statement is really saying from one end to the next. And then spend some time to process it, and then coming out and saying, okay, this is what's wrong, this is what's correct about this. And the Buddha says, "Ariṭṭha, is what we heard true? That you've been promoting such wrong and convolutedly evil views by declaring, the way I have come to understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, all those types of actions that the Blessed One has stated to be obstructions in themselves really have no impact on the one who engages in them. Thus, as far as I can see, in no way could such behaviors truly hinder or be damaging to the person who performs them." Is that true? He's asked. Do you believe that? And the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha replied by saying, "That statement is true, Bhante. For that is exactly the way I have figured it, and therefore have come to understand the Dhamma as taught by the Blessed One. That is, all those types of actions that the Blessed One has stated to be obstructions in themselves really have no impact on the one who engages in them. Thus, as far as I can see, in no way could such behaviors truly hinder or be damaging to the person who performs them. Then why do we have the Vinaya? Why? What are you going forth for? And to where? From what? What are you leaving behind then? That's why you're having encounters where the Buddha sees a holy person, so-called, someone who calls himself a bhikkhu, walking with his stick and all that, and the Buddha calls him a lay person. And this is an older person, he gets offended, he gets insulted, and he's like, oh, I can't believe you're calling me a lay person. How could you? I'm a bhikkhu. And he says, okay, hold on. When this is done, where are you going to go to eat your lunch? He says, I go to my mansion, to my wife, to eat food there that's prepared. And then you go and do your thing, and then you come back. Where do you sleep? Oh, I go back to my bed in the house, and I sleep in my bed next to my wife. So where does the bhikkhu part come in? Where does the monkhood come in? Where does the renunciation and seclusion come in, which are absolute at the core of living the life of a bhikkhu? Person is shocked. He's in his, there's so much delusion. On hearing this confirmation, the Blessed One admonished him while chastised. So Lord Buddha wanted to make sure to confirm it from the person himself while chastising. You stupid and no good for nothing idiot. How did you come up with such a devastatingly absurd thing? Who exactly was it that you witnessed us to teach the Dhamma in such a manner? Who exactly was it that you that you saw us teaching the Dhamma in this manner? Foolish man. On countless occasions, I have repeatedly instructed, taught, and declared in so many ways, by calling out the hindering and obstructing actions and behaviors to be just that, obstructive and hindering. Given the simple fact that they do obstruct, hinder, impede, and therefore block the very progress and growth of anyone who engages in them. Furthermore, in demonstrating the seriousness of this to you all, I have used so many metaphors and similes to make you understand, such as the simile of the skeleton, the simile of a lump of flesh. So he repeats all those similes that we went over. So I'll skip that. Yet, you stupid and no good for nothing idiot, through your own deluded and convolutedly wrong understanding, you have been going ahead and misrepresenting us with your evil notions and conclusions. As a result, you fool, you have now severely harmed and injured yourself, while accumulating such heavy and painful karmic burdens with terrible demerits that your actions have now accrued, all of which will work against you and to your own detriment and suffering for a very long time to come. And today, 2,600 years later almost, now we know who Ariṭṭha is and what he did. That's not good. Then the Blessed One spoke these words while addressing the bhikkhus. And what about you, bhikkhus? What is your position regarding what is being said here? Do you think that this Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha, who previously made his living by capturing vultures, has a spark of any level of discerning wisdom in him? Has he truly gained any level of higher understanding or insight in this Dhamma and discipline at all? And those bhikkhus exclaimed with their fervent response, No way, Bhante. How could he, blessed Lord, seeing that it would surely be an impossibility for him? There is no way that he has gained any level of higher understanding or insight whatsoever in this Dhamma and discipline. Meanwhile, as this was being said, the Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha, who previously had made his living by capturing vultures, now sat there quietly and glum, unable to speak a word, dumbstruck and completely embarrassed, and utterly humiliated for having committed such a grave mistake. Then, on witnessing this, the Blessed One spoke to him once more by saying, "You foolish and good-for-nothing idiot, you will certainly be recognized by your very own deluded and devastatingly harmful views with which you went misrepresenting this dispensation. Now, I shall further question the rest of the bhikkhus on this matter." A few things here to be said about, well, Ariṭṭha, I did mention how, this whole stumbling block and obstruction, or the hindrances, the hindering factors of these activities being so detrimental to the sasana, to the dispensation of the Buddha was. And why, by the way, Moga Purisa is the term the Buddha is using. Some people might find it strange or pulled back. Oh, how could he call him no good for nothing, idiot? Well, the Buddha never used, I had one person say, the Buddha really never used the word foolish, right? When he was addressing a fool. Why would he not? I mean, we have it in the Pali, like this one, for example, which I use the English equivalent of no good for nothing or worthless, idiot. And that's basically, in Pali, the term is Moga Purisa, totally worthless. And Bala is also used often, which is for a fool and a stupid person. You know, when it's a stupid person, you call them out. You call them out. In this day and age where everything is manicured and we beat around the bush, we never say what is really needed to be said. We get the circus that we live in. But if you're really wanting to shake society, shake the person, you have to call it out. If it's gold, you say it's gold. If it's trash, you have to call it trash. You're not going to use other soft language, which our culture, unfortunately, has lost its spine and engages in. The Buddha, did not work with our own measuring stick. Okay, so he didn't hold back. That's why he calls him a stupid person, a foolish, no good for nothing idiot. But coming back to Ariṭṭha himself, and circumstances that followed, which we don't have it in the sutta, that's why I'm filling in here. We know from the Vinaya, Vinaya is the code of discipline for the monks. The Buddha had to make new rules because of this behavior done by, because of his specifically of the wrong views. The Vinaya addresses that. How tenaciously does one hold on to this? Now, we don't see him anymore throughout the sutta after this section is over. But what we do know is that he was expelled. And that's in Pali, in the Vinaya, it's called pācittiya, or committing the offense of expiation or being expelled until further notice, until that expulsion ruling is overturned by the Sangha for some reason. And nowhere did I see any indication that was revoked at all. So Ariṭṭha was expelled not because of having wrong view, mind you. It was because he tenaciously grabbed on and he did not want to let go. He kept on insisting that he was right. In many, many suttas, you've seen the individual being confronted, and then the person, when they realize the mistake, and how they went against the Dhamma, the truth that is the Dhamma, they would come forward and they say to whoever, whether it's Lord Buddha or some of the other chief disciples, they would say, sorry, Bhante, I apologize. Please forgive me. You do not see that being done here by Ariṭṭha. In fact, he went back to lay life and he still kept hanging around, and some bhikkhus were also chastised, and there were some ramifications. Even a few nuns would hang out with him. That tells you something, that some of the bhikkhus believed in what he was saying. So they were also punished, but they weren't expelled. There's different, less severe punishments where they have to come and confess what they've done, and they have to say that they're not going to do it again. Otherwise, you cannot keep such characters in the Sangha, because the purity of the Sangha will be gone. Okay? It's like having pests, having rats inside your kitchen. It doesn't work. It's going to mess up everything. It's going to pollute the minds and the lives of others who are trying to really live the pure, holy life. Because the understanding of the Dhamma is crucial. If your understanding is wrong, which is the case, unfortunately, in the world today, in many, many situations, sadly, there's no growth. That's another reason why the Dhamma's light is dying out. People aren't practicing it. They're in love with their own interpretations and views about the Dhamma. Terrible mistake. So the Buddha now, by addressing the bhikkhus, continued by saying, and how do you bhikkhus understand the Dhamma that I have been teaching you thus far? Do you hold the view held by this Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha, who previously made his living by capturing vultures, and the way he has been grabbing onto his convolutedly wrong understanding, with which he has been going around and misrepresenting us, using his evil notions and conclusions, harming and injuring himself in the process, while accumulating such heavy and painful karmic burdens with terrible demerits for him that his actions have now accrued, all of which will work against him and to his own detriment and suffering, and for a very long time to come. And those bhikkhus replied by exclaiming, absolutely not, Bhante. After all, on countless occasions, the Blessed One has repeatedly instructed, taught, and declared to us, and in so many ways, by calling out the hindering obstructing actions and behaviors to be just that, obstructive and hindering. Furthermore, in demonstrating the seriousness of this to us all, the Blessed One has used so many metaphors, so they're repeating that section. All this, Bhante, you have explained and clarified on many an occasion to highlight for us the many dangers and drawbacks that always follow that disappointing and dangerously risky pursuit after sensual gratification. For the very terrifying dangers it brings are far greater, outweighing and outlasting any sensual desire that one pursues. So they're just, because the Buddha has to know, he can't just take it as at face value. He has to ask, who are these bhikkhus sitting around him? What do they believe? Because sometimes, for whatever reason, a student might not express that they don't understand, or question their own understanding by bringing it up to the teacher, saying, Bhante, this is what I understand. Is this correct? I mean, you see this many times with Venerable Sariputta, the general of the Dhamma, the second in wisdom to the Buddha only. He himself would often come to the Buddha and say, Bhante, I answered this person who came to me this way. Was that correct? Did I misrepresent you? Look at the humility. That doesn't exist these days. Well, for centuries. As I was saying, everybody who comes up with their own conclusions, they want to go ahead and start writing a book, making a commentary, and providing proof that they're right. and never going to the suttas or manipulating the suttas so that the suttas seem like they are proving him or her right, selectively, cherry picking. But the Buddha has to ask. I remember when I was teaching for the sciences and in high school, I would oftentimes had to stop after I thought that I really explained it very well. And the whiteboard was covered from one end to the next with diagrams, explanations, and all these things for the students, teenagers to really grasp. Part of me would say, well, what if they didn't get it? Well, how would I know unless I ask? So I had to ask. Do you get it? Sometimes I had to ask a few times. Do you see what I'm saying? And then you would hear one person who has the courage to say, actually, I don't get that part. So instead of getting mad at them saying, oh, how could you not get it? I explained it 10 times. No, you don't do that. Because that's the cause of their fear, perhaps, or their own shyness. And then the other person next to them find it as an opportunity, and they say something, yeah, but the other thing too, I don't get that. And that's beautiful, because now the student is revealing their vulnerability of not knowing, which is okay. That's why the teacher exists, not to show off, not for hierarchy purposes, which serves nothing. That's what the teacher does. That's why you're a teacher. And that's why the Buddha was here asking, and what is your position, bhikkhus, about this? He needs to know if there are more aritas in the presence. So once that they say that, so okay, the Buddha says, very good, bhikkhus. It is truly good that you all understand the Dhamma in this manner. After all, on countless occasions, I have repeatedly instructed, taught, and declared to you in so many ways. So he repeats that section as well as the section on the 10 metaphors or similes. And then he comes back to Ariṭṭha. Yet this stupid and no good for nothing Bhikkhu Ariṭṭha, who previously made his living by capturing. There's also that thing that they add, the previous profession, which is like an insulting thing. You have the same thing in the Mahatanha Sankhya Sutta, where the Buddha says the same thing with similar thing to another bhikkhu with wrong views, Sati, the one who engaged in catching and buying of fish, the son of a fisherman. You have it countless times repeated in the sutta to kind of like, he stunk with his ideas, just like he used to stink before. As a layman, his hands would stink of fish. So now he stinks of stupidity, type of a thing, just in that title. So I don't know if the commentators or the compilers later on added those, but it's interesting about the person with wrong view. So he says that as a result, this fool has now harmed himself severely, and he's going to have to face the suffering of that for a very long time to come. Now, bhikkhus, you must all remember this. It is impossible for someone to indulge in any sensual activity without first having and perpetuating sensual desires in one's heart. You cannot pursue it. Pursue the gaining, the quest of gratification, of sense pleasures or sexuality or sensual pleasures, delights in them, indulging in them, without first there being in you, in your heart, in your mind, the perpetuation of that. You basically are allowing such thoughts to have a place in your awareness. A memory, perhaps, a wish, perhaps, an unrealized hope from a past. And even though you don't subscribe to it, perhaps, nevertheless, you like to bring it up every once in a while. That itself is the venom. That itself is poison. that will ruin you. And then you're going to say, oh, it was a moment of weakness, Bhante. No, you're talking about that explosion, moment where it just burst, the bubble burst. But what was filling up the balloon meanwhile? So you perpetuating sensual thoughts, desires, or entertaining ideas about, or memories about it is like a person who keeps blowing air into a balloon. Well, it's going to pop. Don't blame the balloon for popping afterwards. Don't blame even the sharp, thorny objects around you, the needle that's here and there in life, and call it, oh, it's the cause of its bursting. No, you were the one who was filling it up with air. This is very poignant, very advanced, in fact. This is deep psychology. The Buddha just, in one sentence, it is impossible for someone to indulge in any sensual activity without first having and perpetuating sensual desires in one's heart. It's like the algorithm or the language that's already pre-installed. It's in the operating system. So now you can just put it in and all of a sudden the computer recognizes it and spits out the necessary information. But if it's not in there, if the algorithm is missing, you're not pondering sensual thoughts, entertaining memories of it, then the experience of seeing, let's say, a provocative image or whatever will not get you instigated, will not provoke you. And the Buddha uses many examples or similes for that. He says, the one who's, it's like the bull that with his horns cut off. The one who has lowered the flag, the banner. So you're no longer in the army, or you're no longer in the battlefield. You've given up. And that's what an arahant is. They're equanimous. They see it, but they don't see it anymore. Because there's no entertainment. There's no papanchas. There's no perpetuation of conceptions and memories, regurgitations of, oh, what ifs. And then the Buddha concludes this section by saying, therefore, without there being any perceptions pertaining to sensual indulgence, without thinking or entertaining thoughts of sensuality or lusting after sensual experiences, it would simply be impossible for anyone to ever want to engage or indulge in such behavior. Let that sink in. Without there being any perceptions pertaining to sensual indulgence, perceptions as in sanya, mental association, without thinking or entertaining thoughts of sensuality or lusting after sensual experiences, it would simply be impossible for anyone to ever want to engage or indulge in such behavior. So what is not observable is very important. What's inside, what's happening in the dark corners of your mind, behind the curtains, heavy, heavy, dark curtains, what are you spending your time thinking or allowing, and instead of pushing and extricating, pulling out of you, abandoning you. And that's what happens when you have an enemy that you don't get rid of from your kingdom. When there's a terrible person that you allow to come and live in your house, just like those rats I mentioned in the kitchen, then don't blame anyone afterwards. Oh, I can't believe that my family members were butchered because of, we never expected. No, you did expect, you knew that this person was a murderer. You allowed him in, you gave him room, you allowed him to sit down with his knives and weapons in front of you. They never said, I've stopped. So this is how the relationship has to be with our old tendencies of habitual drives, sankharas. How much do you tolerate? See, the Buddha's point here is never to tolerate any of these proclivities. Never to tolerate. So in the case of the bhikkhu, we kick them out. The moment that, this is part of the four right efforts, the moment you see it having arisen, you eliminate, you get rid of it. And whatever negative state that has not yet arisen, you make sure it doesn't get that chance. You get rid of whatever remainder is there. You close up all the holes so rats don't come in preemptively. And whatever has arisen, you cut them off. So you don't say, well, let me just go, roll with it and just ignore. There's no ignoring. Remember I said about the body, the six senses? Your mind is part of them. Remember I said it's on a lease, not a leash only, but on a lease contract. You borrow from Mara all these capacities. Who owns it, therefore? Mara does. Mara knows you better than you know yourself. Here I'm using Mara as a metaphor or as a term for the whole bag of sankharas that are limitless, of actions that we have committed, that we don't even remember we have committed. Nevertheless, their momentum is still very much going, powerful. And that's a tendency of repeatability. When we repeat a certain action, a certain behavior, it does not stop after some time. It perpetually grows because we keep on repeating them. And they, because it's an action, because it's conditionally done, sankata, it will bring results. So nothing happens without its reasons. It depends on many, many factors. That's paticcasamuppada. So if you have a certain behavioral issue that seems to be sabotaging you or something like that, don't blame anyone. We are responsible for them. So even though I used Mara, but we're talking about these all sankharas that always seem to work against us. So you don't have the luxury of avoiding them, of ignoring them, and letting them stay like that criminal in your house. No, you nip it in the butt as quickly as possible, the moment you notice it. Instead of becoming Ariṭṭha, who said, it's okay, I got this. No, it's okay. I got this. I can live with the murderer in my house and I'll be fine. It's okay when the sensual, sexual thoughts come in, or I interact with people who are very provocative, or I put myself in provocative situations. I know I'm okay. That's a no-no. You're asking for trouble, and that is not part of this Dhamma teaching. You're trying to do something that is not part of the teaching. And you will fail. And you will have only one person to blame, yourself. And because the conceit is so big for many people, they will, like Ariṭṭha, they will never apologize. And that's the end of Ariṭṭha in this first section. So the sutta's first section ends, and next week we'll start the venomous water snake simile. So here we say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu for this portion. And I hope it gave you a chance to look a little bit differently towards life, sensuality, suttas, the teachings. And I'll stop here, see if there's any question, comment. The throat is acting out for some reason. Any thoughts? Questions?
I
Yes.
might mention something, Bante. It's quite a poignant one for me, to be honest.
Mm.
Um, and I do remember thinking Mara's waiting for me at every corner as I'm navigating through, day-to-day interactions and stuff like that. So
Mm.
I don't really have any questions, but it's a poignant one that's complicated. Not complicated, it's the wrong word. Difficult. It's a tenuous path when you've lived a life in a certain way. And it's actually when everything, the understanding and the wisdom starts getting applied, it brings everything to the forefront. Not so much in an overwhelming way, but in a full way. I'm getting a lot of opportunity to practice, put it that way. And when you stray and catch it, that's when Mara's there. And that's what I've been feeling like. There's other thoughts and other perceptions, other sanyas that come up. And I've even had a thought arise where I was sort of trying to get convinced that the path wasn't right for me. I should pull away. Nothing overly negative, but that other path, the alternative, back to Patujana land was calling. Why should I lose out on this opportunity for sensual desire? Why should I miss out on this and that and the other? So it's an interesting one. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yes, yes. Thank you for contributing that. I know as a well as a bhikkhu, um, well, prior, let me rewind. For years, when my father refused to give me his permission, um, which basically stalled my ordination for about 25 years, until right before his death, he gave me his permission, and happily, because he had seen how much the Dhamma had done for me, and how he saw in front of his eyes how his son was transformed. And I didn't break, I didn't cringe, I didn't lose it when life really did a number, actually several numbers on me. But I still kept, I didn't get into drugs, I didn't do anything foolish, but I kept becoming better and better in his eyes, and to the point where it changed his life. I mean, many of this I didn't hear him say, but your parents, the changes that occur in him. So when a person never says the word or the words "I'm sorry" throughout his life, and then in his 80s or his late 70s he turns and says "I'm sorry," you listen. Something's changed. So the Dhamma was seeping into his life. So anyhow, I'm coming to what you were saying, to the poignancy of this is very relevant at the time, because I would go to different temples asking for how great it would be playing the scenario. And I had many bhikkhu friends, as I've mentioned a few times, for 25, 30 years or so. I had known so many, and but then when I would bring up ordination, they would be stunned. They would be surprised. But you have everything. You're a layperson. You're this. You're that. You're tall. You're so skilled, etc., etc. But how are you going to deal with sex? It comes up, even ordination after ordination. How are you going to handle it? I was like, maybe they know something I don't know, type of a thing. But then what about being committed? What if you're a layperson, let's say, and you're married to someone, you love someone, or your partner? That's a commitment, isn't it? If it's truly respectful, mature, and you don't go around cheating on her. There's commitment. Why? Because it's either that or death for the mind of the person who's loyal, who's committed. Either this thing called collapses, and then fine, I'll go and do that. But it's kind of, I don't want to besmudge in a way, or the example I'm bringing in the Dhamma here in the case of ordination. But basically, one day I said, well, how many lives have I had? Based on what I read in the suttas, countless. What are the chances that I lived a full lay life in those endless samsaric lives? They're probably endless. That means you found someone, you fought this, that, and then you found someone and you married that person, and then you had kids, and then this and that, and then you died. You said goodbye to everyone. Sometimes you never got the chance. Okay, male or female, this species or that, but basically you ran the gamut. You've gone through all this. But how many times have I really practiced fully in a lifetime? How many times have I come close to going forth, ordaining? And what are the chances I'm going to come back? Well, plenty. To come back as a human, I don't know, hopefully with all the sila that you practice and generosity that you practice, possibly again, soon, if not the next one. Okay, what are the chances that I'm going to be a practitioner then? Chances are you will be engaged in or be in a surrounding where people will push you, situations will gear you towards sensuality. I mean, you see it in chicken, and you see it in cats, you see it in dogs, you see it in everywhere. So that is the norm, the default mode. But when you are saying, okay, I want to make a difference in this life, because I have this life at all, this is it. This is the one guarantee now. And given the fact that I am going to come back more times, chances are, if I don't make to arahantship, I will become a human again, let's say. And this was my spiritual mathematics or arithmetic that I was playing at the time in my head, to really question that. Oh, no. I cannot, not get married, not be engaged in sensual pleasures and things like that. I shouldn't get, ordination is so passé, as it's totally against life type of a thing. These are, you can call them mara, but they're also your fears. I don't know about the future lives, but I have a shot here. This is my opportunity. I'm going to take it. And chances are I've had countless lives where I was a full-on householder. And where did that get me? Where did those get me? Back to square one. It hasn't changed one bit. So now, why am I getting all flustered over the possibility that I might turn my back against, to household life? What did household life do to me all these years? You have examples of this in the encounter that Lord Buddha has while visiting Migara's mother's house and palace, with speaking of Visakha, the great generous lady who built that Pubbarama, the eastern side of Savatthi, for the monks. So the Buddha asks her, because she already had 100 grandchildren. She had 10 children. And the Buddha just asks her, would you like to have more? She goes, oh yes, Bhante. And then the Buddha says a few inspiring words in verses. And he says, people don't learn. She's still craving, She was still stuck. Oh, I want more. And she happened to be a Sotapanna, by the way. So that was one of my things, was like, no. Come rain or shine, I'm going with this. This is it. Because I had lived a full lay life in this life, and it had left me blank. It had left me empty-handed. It had left me unsatisfied. Always needing more and not feeling full. What is this? This is ugly. I don't want to waste my time on this anymore. Even though the world is pushing me in that direction, I was like, hold on. I'm going to leave this path entirely and go that path, that road that doesn't look like, safe, well trodden, no street lights, no lamps. I'm willing to go there because you're reading the suttas, you're exploring, and you're seeing, wow. And the practice is also showing that you're changing, as I was mentioning earlier, transforming. The Dhamma is immediately effective. You don't take a risk into the unknown by, blindly. I have not come across any element of part of life lived with the Dhamma where that was the case. There's needed trust, of course. That's a different story. But trust that is connected with wisdom in your heart. You always take steps as needed into the unknown per se, but with wisdom, with discernment. Not blindly. Nor even by, I trust the Buddha and then take this step. No, because that could be a crucial mistake. And Mara loves that. In the guise of Dhamma, you engage in unwholesome behavior. That's what people do. People engage in gossip, backstabbing, hurting, lying. Noble disciples, while they themselves think that they're doing something good. I mean, talk about how delusion the person has. There's no wisdom there. That's I feel sorry for them. And just send them metta. That's all you could do. So I know I did a 360 around what you were saying. So I hope it's definitely poignant. Any other thoughts, questions? So next week we'll continue from the raft section. If there's none, then we can transfer some merits. Okay. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu losaksan sanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May your practice continuously grow, and may you feel more and more joyful being on the path of this practice. May the world be at peace, and may whatever merits that we have accumulated from this session today, by listening and sharing the Dhamma, all that, may they be shared with all beings, from the highest of Brahma gods to the Devas, to the Nagas, to the Yaksas, the Gandharvas, to the Garudas, to the Kumpandas, to the Asuras, to humans, to animals, and especially Petas, the miserable, hungry ghosts, experiencing misery constantly. May they get a breather. May they get a moment of respite. and especially all those in the world who are suffering, all those who are facing injustice, lies, deceptions. May the truth come out. May healing take place. May virtue be established in people's hearts and in families and in society. May the world find its way back on a wholesome, good path, Dhammic path, that leads them towards wisdom, growth, and awakening. May the Triple Gems blessings be with you all. Until next time. Sukhi Hotu.